Sorry about your eyes, but it is the Wheelhouse, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. Alongside Andrew Carlson?
Yeah, really weird, BK. Really, really weird.
AC is co-hosting today, meaning for the first time in my nearly 2-year history working at ESPN 97.5 and 92.5, we are in the same room.
You know, if I knew that all I had to do to get on this desk was get on Chump of the week prior, I would have said that the phone line was 713-780-3776 way sooner than I did.
That's all it took.
Oh, man, easy.
Just because of that infamous yet so famous moment on the bullpen last weekend, you now get the opportunity to audition to be the third host of the Wheelhouse.
Incredible.
Yeah. How you feeling about this?
Oh, incredibly nervous.
Yeah.
You know, very excited, obviously, but a little bit nervous.
Okay.
Try not to just crash and burn over the next 3 hours and, 58 minutes now?
Yeah. Not that you're counting down or anything.
No,
that.
It's not like I have a clock that I'm doing the math with right now.
No. But should be fun. AC is co-hosting today. We got Josh producing. I am Jay Chevy on Twitter is how you can find Josh. You can find Andrew at Carlson Radio. You can find me at Brad Kellner. And, of course, you can find the station at ESPN 975 on all social media accounts. I hope everyone had a fantastic weekend, and we're happy to have you with us for some or all of your Monday afternoon. Once again, we are broadcasting until 7 o'clock. It was a pretty good weekend for the Astros, AC. We do not complain about series wins on this show. Maybe not the most aesthetically pleasing of series wins, but ultimately the Astros did what they needed to do in Oakland, taking 3 of 4 from the Athletics. They got a little help from the LA Dodgers, who took 2 of 3 in Arlington against the Rangers over the weekend. So the Astros made up a game in the American League West standings. And, of course, the big series between the Astros and Rangers starts tonight at Minute Maid. We'll preview that plenty throughout the course of today's program. But let's go back to the weekend first, AC. Your biggest takeaway from the Stros taking 3 of 4 at the Coliseum?
They love to make things hard, BK. This Astros team, for whatever reason, you mentioned it there, they, for whatever reason, just cannot seem to make the easy things look easy on a very consistent basis. And it was the case against the A's again this past weekend. Like, this is a team that, if you look at all the metrics, whatever you want to say, the Astros should be taking this team behind the woodshed. And the bats went silent for the most part yet again. The pitching staff did okay. All right, we're going to talk about what Christian Javier and Hunter Brown were able to put together in their starts over the weekend. But by and large, it's just this Astros team does not make anything look easy, and that's really how it's been this entire season.
Yeah, they only outscored the Athletics by a total of 2 runs over these 4 games. Now, the good news is they won 3 out of 4, but it wasn't the dominant performance I think you could expect when these two teams get together. The Astros hadn't lost to the A's before this series started, and the A's have been getting outscored by 2.5 runs per game this season. So they're the worst hitting team in baseball. They're the worst pitching team in baseball. And the Astros, obviously one of the best teams in all of baseball. Even though they were shorthanded, no Yordan, no Altuve, no Urquidy, still probably would have liked to see a little bit more dominance. But ultimately, it's baseball, and you don't dominate every single day you go out there. And at the end of the day, there are no style points in this sport, Andrew. All that matters is that you get the wins. Saturday stings. You feel like that was a winnable game. The offense, unfortunately, didn't get the job done. You had a no-hitter going into the 6th inning of that game, so you really would have felt that, all right, hey, we've got a no-hitter going into the 6th against the A's. That's a game we're going to win 10 out of 10 times. Unfortunately, situational baseball wasn't prevalent for the Stros. They couldn't get that one done. But yeah, no style points in this thing. It's still 3 wins and 1 loss. I understand if you'd want the sweep, you want the sweep every time you go out there, but especially taking on a team like that. But still, ultimately, at the end of the day, the Astros did do what they were supposed to do and get that series win.
Absolutely. And you know what? On top of that, they did that, like you mentioned, with so many of these replacement parts type players scattered throughout the lineup. I understand Astros Twitter, and myself included, were really upset when Gray Kessinger was leading off at some point in the series. We saw Bly Madris, the experiment at first base, was a mixed bag of results there, we'll say, to put it nicely for Bly. But by and large, you can't ever complain about winning a 4-game series 3-1. Like, that's the end of the day story here. And look, as long as the Astros can keep, sort of piecing these sort of results together, and they're in a great spot heading into the series with the Rangers, where the Rangers aren't exactly at full strength coming into this series at Minute Maid Park. You are in a fantastic position from how beaten down they were by against the Dodgers to what the roster looks like now, you are in a fantastic position, a fantastic spot to really get, 1-2 games back against the Rangers here, and then all of a sudden, look, you could be looking at, hey, you win these first couple games, Fromber's coming in, potentially tied with the division lead.
Yeah, that's what could happen over these next 3 days. So, look, I guarantee you if the Astros win every single series they have the rest of the way, they're going to win the American League West. There's a damn good chance they end up with the number 1 seed in the American League as well. Diving into some of the good, how about Kyle Tucker, man?
Oh, man.
I mean, what can you say about King Tuck? Over the 9-game road trip that the Astros just wrapped up, Tuck hit .429, 5 doubles, 4 homers, 12 RBIs. Of course, had that 3 home run game on Friday. AC, I don't think those batting gloves are going anywhere anytime soon.
It's one of the biggest mysteries with Kyle Tucker for me. It's like sometimes he decides to have the batting gloves on. Sometimes he decides to have them off. Well, if he's going to keep hitting like this, keep the batting gloves on for as long as you like.
Yeah.
Because, golly, he was just absolutely incredible. And he's played like the best player in baseball really for the past month plus now, BK. I mean, you look at the numbers that he is compiling over this recent stretch, and he's not going to win the MVP. I'm not going to say anything like that, but he's played like an MVP and been the Astros' best player at the time when they've needed him most over this recent play.
Kind of feels like deja vu. I mean, obviously with the Jordan and Altuve injuries, you're right. The necessity for King Tuck to pick up his game the way he has is a lot higher, but this is what he did last year. Got off to the slow start. That's kind of a staple for Kyle Tucker. Sluggish in the month of April. Sometimes it carries over into May. But as the weather heats up, so does CarShield guy. And Kyle Tucker has been magnificent. You said it. Over the last 30 days, he's got an OPS nearing 1,100. He actually leads the American League in OPS against lefties. That's not just over the last 30 days. That's on the entirety of the season. The batting average for the season is now over 300. I mean, this is a similar conversation that we had about Tucker 2 years ago when, for the first month and a half of the season, he was pretty average and you're wondering if he's going to pick it up. And then really it was the rest of the way where Tuck was playing at an almost MVP level. And you're thinking, all right, if this guy could just put this together over an entire 162-game season, then he might win an MVP at some point in his career. You're right, it's not going to happen. Shohei Ohtani exists. Even if that guy gets hurt, there's probably a couple of other guys who have had more consistently better seasons than Kyle Tucker. But he's playing at an MVP level. And if Jordan does come back, which that's the expectation, Andrew, at some point in this series, hopefully tonight, but at some point in this series.
Not in the lineup tonight.
Oh, okay. Hopefully at some point in this series, I'm going to check Twitter a little bit. Then you get Jordan doing what he's capable of doing. You get Tucker doing what he's been doing. Obviously, Altuve, you feel like, is a couple of weeks away. We know what he's capable of. Then all of a sudden, we're talking about an Astros offense that more closely resembles the 2017 to 2022 Astros offenses versus the one that we saw that was pretty inconsistent over the first half of 2020.
And that's why you're not necessarily in the market, I think, as much for a bat right now. Because you think that in an ideal world, these guys all get healthy, and maybe that's asking too much, given Jordan's history and given how inconsistent the season has been for Altuve from a health perspective. But you get everybody back, and we really have not seen this lineup at full strength for basically any extended period of time this entire season. You get everybody back, and all of a sudden, this lineup looks incredibly fearsome, at least compared to what we've seen for the majority of the year thus far. And then you're looking at, okay, you know what? Maybe we don't need that extra, half run a game that another bat that comes into the lineup could potentially bring us on average over the rest of the season. So I know Dana Brown has talked about that a lot over the course of the season leading up to this trade deadline where, when we score over 5 runs, we're basically unbeatable. Well, maybe when we get the entire lineup back healthy, the team will be able to do that on a much more consistent basis, and you're not looking at needing to bring that bat in, and you can spend some of those resources and allocate them better for a trade elsewhere.
Yeah, it's almost hard to find a place to acquire a bat, right? You've got some really good outfield depth. You assume Jordan's going to be playing some in left field. Chas McCormick has developed into a really, really good player. We know what Kyle Tucker's capable of, and he's been amazing. We've talked about it, maybe the best player in the American League over the last month and change. So, and then you look at the infield, okay, Jose Abreu's been a disappointment. He has picked it up as of late. They're still not replacing him, whether you like it or not. Obviously, Altuve's there. Jeremy Pena's been scuffling. We've talked about that on this show a decent amount as of late. Did have 3 hits in the 4 games against Oakland. Not a great series by any stretch of the imagination, but an improvement over what he had done in the second half before that series. Feels like he's going to stay because of what he did in last year's postseason, and also the fact that he's the future of the shortstop position. You feel like you're set at catcher. You obviously feel like you're set at third base. So, yeah, it makes more sense to add a starting pitcher and a bullpen arm, I think, than a bat right now. And that's probably what the top priority is going to be for the Astros over the next 7 days. Speaking of Alex Bregman, I mean, it felt like he and Tucker were carrying the team in Oakland. Homered in 3 straight games. And AC, we've talked about this a lot on this show over the last couple of years, and every Astros fan has talked about it. Wanting to see more signs of 2019 Alex Bregman. Well, homered in 3 straight games over the weekend. First time he's done that since 2019. He's done it now 5 times in his career, but all of them came in 2019 or before when he was playing at an MVP level. Over the last 14 days, he's got an OPS over 1,100. Now, similar conversation to Kyle Tucker. Like, this guy's not going to be MVP, and Tucker's having a better season than Bregman. But this guy gets hot, and he's able to stay anywhere close to this. That just makes this lineup so much more fearsome. Having Breggy in that cleanup spot, producing the way that he has been, that's massive for this team.
And you don't even need to have him replicate what he's doing right now. Just do something that approximates it. You know, like, you're not needing Alex Bregman to be MVP-level Bregman like he's been over these past 2 weeks, like he was in 2019 when he finished second. You just need him to be, hey, Alex, go out there, hit 270, 275, get on base, work the count like you do, and have a little bit of pop in your bat. And there's part of me that always gets a little concerned with these results against the A's because Bregman, for all his faults as a player, one thing I believe that he consistently can do is hit well against poor pitching. He is someone who works the counts extremely well, and he punishes, in his career, has been someone who's capable of punishing mistakes. And the Oakland A's make a ton of mistakes. And he was able to capitalize on it and make it count this past week. Let's see if he can do it moving forward. Big series against the Rangers. Mm-hmm. If he's able to do that, able to keep that moving forward, it just furthers the discussion that we just had, the fact that this Astros lineup could all of a sudden, over the course of the next couple of weeks, look infinitely better than it has at any point prior.
No doubt about that. The Astros take 3 of 4 from the Athletics. I think Tucker and Bregman, the goodest of goods from the weekend it was at the old Oakland Coliseum. And, of course, the big series with the Rangers starts tonight. The biggest series of the season for both teams. It gets going at the Juice Box this evening. When we return, talk more about the Astros. There's an interesting stat that does not bode well for the 2023 Astros. We're going to compare this year's Astros team to some of the previous World Series champions, and there's one number out there that maybe gives us a little bit of hesitancy about whether or not this Astros team can repeat. Andrew Carlson filling in for Jake Asman today. I am BK Brad Kellner, and this is the Wheelhouse on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. But all right, we teased it before the break. Look, I'm an eye test guy, and eye test matters. And I also am a believer in sports destiny. Sometimes you can just tell it feels like your year. Sometimes you can kind of tell that it doesn't really feel like your year. And that's been a popular topic of conversation amongst Astros fans about whether or not 2023 feels like the Astros year. Of course, the Astros are trying to become the first team in Major League Baseball to repeat as world champs since the late 90s, early 2000s Yankees. It's very, very difficult to do. The Astros obviously had high expectations. You felt like going into the year, the talent on this roster was enough to at least have the Astros in that conversation and in contention when we got to the end of the season and obviously into the postseason as well. But a lot of Astros fans, just whether it's the injuries, whether it's the eye test, whether it's this or that, whether it's the emergence of the Rangers, there's plenty of things that you could point to where a lot of Astros fans have kind of talked like, it just doesn't really feel like it's the Astros year in 2023. But Andrew, you've done some research. You actually found a stat about this topic that maybe goes beyond the eye test. It sort of tells you that, unfortunately, unless things change over the course of the second half of the season, it really might not be the Astros year.
Yeah, I was looking to boil down that feeling that I think all Astros fans have sort of talked about in their conversations regarding the team of them not being able to win it all this year. I tried to boil that down into a number that could be sort of digestible from a statistical perspective, right? Because the reality is, what does it come down to when you say, hey, that doesn't feel like their year? I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that you look at how they're winning games, and they're not winning games in the convincing manner that they have in years prior, right? It seems like every single game, every single series is a battle and a struggle for the Astros to come out on top. And in previous seasons, it hasn't always felt that way. How many blowouts have the Astros had this season? You can probably count them on your hand. It just every single time that the Astros are able to come out on top, it feels like a massive struggle. And that's it's bared out in the statistics by the fact that I looked this up. The Astros' average margin of victory, so we didn't go just through the wins, but this is their average margin of victory. So essentially, you're averaging their run differential over the first 100 games.
Mm-hmm.
This season, average margin of victory, 0.6 runs per game. Now, I looked at that and I said, okay, that doesn't sound all that great. I feel like in years past, it probably should have been at least double that or significantly higher. And so I felt like the window to go back and analyze how this compared to teams prior would be back to when the Astros first rose to prominence in 2015, right? That feels like a good starting point from a statistical perspective of saying, okay, this is relevant to this Astros era from when it first started to where they are now.
Yeah.
So going all the way back to 2015, this Astros margin of victory of 0.6 runs per game would be the lowest for a World Series champion since those 2015 Royals, who had a run differential or average margin of victory of 0.5 runs per game. And let me tell you, I really like this Astros team. I really like their bullpen. It is not that 2015 Royals bullpen. It is not good enough to compare to what the Royals had in their back end back then.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why that they were able to be so successful playing the small ball they did in 2015 was because of the fact that once they got to the sixth inning, it was game over.
Mm-hmm. So it's not just the eye test or the feels like. The Astros just aren't dominating teams the way that they have in years past. And we talked about it last segment. Look, ultimately, all that matters at the end of the day is just winning games, right? You can win every single game by one run in the playoffs, and if you win 11, then you're going to be a World Series champion. So style points, not a thing in this sport. But generally, not just in baseball, but in every sport, you kind of look at the run/point differential to see just how good a team really is. And it feels like more often than not, one of the teams amongst the league leaders in that statistic is the team that ultimately wins the championship in their respective sport. The Astros just aren't there right now.
Yeah, and if you look at the history for this statistic over the last, 8 years since in this Astros run here, the 2022 World Series champions were obviously the Astros. They had an average margin of victory of 1.4 runs per game. Atlanta, 2021, 0.8. The Dodgers in that COVID Fugazi season, 2.3. The Nationals in 2019, 0.9. The Red Sox in 18, 1.4. Astros in 17, 1.2. The Cubs in 16, 1.6. So we're talking about a relatively significant difference from a per-game perspective in a lot of these seasons compared to what the Astros are putting out.
Yeah, and both of the Astros World Series titles were at least double.
At least double, yeah.
The current margin of victory per game that they're putting out this year. So, look, I mean, we still have 60 games plus left in the year. There's obviously time for this statistic to change, either positively or negatively, and there's a way for the eye test and things to look more like this is a World Series team than maybe what we've seen over the course of the first 100 games of this Astros season. I'm with you. I think guys coming back from injury is going to make a huge difference. Like Jordan with that bat, how much of a run producer he is. That guy right there can be a 2-run difference in a margin of victory. Jose Altuve, the best second baseman in baseball for my money. That guy comes back. The pop he has at the top of the lineup, he obviously can help the Astros get better at this stat too. And then, of course, the trade deadline as well. Like, we don't know how that's going to shake out. And obviously, it's not only the Astros who are going to be making additions between now and August 1st. So other teams are going to get better. But it feels like there are a lot of tangible things that you could really point to that should improve this stat in the second half of the year. And obviously, it's not just the fact that Jordan and Altuve are out right now. I mean, Altuve missed the first couple of months of the season with an injury, and the Astros have just been ransacked by injuries, and it feels like, well, they won't ever be fully healthy this year because Michael Brantley is where he is, and obviously McCullers and Garcia are out for the season. It does feel like this team is about to be, knock on wood, the healthiest that it's been all year. So they will have that opportunity to start dominating teams kind of the way that they have in the past. But that is interesting. That is interesting. I would like to see, I mean, I still feel good about the Astros' chances. Like, with Jordan and Altuve, and I'll throw Urquidy in there too, but I think he's way less important for the sake of this hypothetical, I would still pick the Astros to win the American League. Like, as bad as things have looked at times this year, and even with this stat that I didn't know before today, but that I do know now, like, I would still peg the Astros as the favorites in the American League. And once again, there's reason to believe that things are going to get better.
No, I agree. And you laid out plenty of paths that are legitimately realistic solutions for the Astros fixing this. And if you could compare the Astros to one of the teams on this list, I mean, the Atlanta Braves in 2021, they went on an absolute tear after the All-Star break. And a lot of that was just simply them getting their ideal team finally on the field again. And a lot of that was through the trade deadline and the work that they did rejigging their entire outfield. But the Astros have the capability to do something similar, not necessarily just through the trade deadline, but just through getting healthy, like you mentioned. And the reality of it all is, like, this stat at the end of the day, while it is, like, rather harrowing from a perspective of, okay, this doesn't seem to trend well, in the playoffs, all it takes is just getting in there and getting hot.
Sure.
And as long as the Astros are in the mix, I think you're 100% right, BK. The statistics, at least from, this is another like anecdotal eye test sort of thing, the statistics, at least in my mind, play less in the playoffs, and we're talking more about how are you dealing with the pressure situations, how are you dealing with that environment in the playoffs, and there's no team that's better placed to do that than the Astros.
No doubt about that. And I'm looking at the run differentials across Major League Baseball right now, and even though the Astros number is relatively low, there are only 4 teams in baseball with a higher run differential than the Astros right now. Now, some of them are way higher. Like the Astros are plus 55 on the season. The Rangers are at plus 151. The Rays are at plus 144. The Braves are at plus 148. But it's only those 3 and the Dodgers who have a better run differential than this Astros team this year. So it kind of goes to the point, like, I think Atlanta's the clear favorite right now in all of baseball. Like, they've just been dominating teams over the last couple of months. They're loaded with talent. They obviously have some postseason experience from what they did a couple of years ago, unfortunately, and just the number of playoff runs that they've been on in recent years. Like, they should be the favorites right now, but I don't think that team's unbeatable.
No.
I don't think any team in Major League Baseball is unbeatable. So, especially when you take a look at the American League, like Baltimore, Tampa Bay, the Rangers, the Twins, I don't know if anyone should be super bought into those teams and believing that the Astros would have no chance. I don't think anybody in this town believes that the Astros would have no chance against any of those teams. So, yeah, I mean, that stat, not the most promising thing in the world, but AC, in a wide-open year like this one, it might not matter as much as it would have in years past.
Yeah, and you mentioned Tampa Bay there. You want to talk about someone who's falling back to earth in a very rapid manner. The Rays are not exactly playing their best baseball at this moment in time, and they really haven't since that incredibly hot stretch to start the season. The AL is as wide open as it's going to be, and since the Astros have been dominated over the last 5 or 6 years, this is the first time where you have felt that there isn't a true, lead horse at the front of the pack. And why couldn't that be the Astros? They have the pedigree, and they have the ability to fix a lot of their issues in a very, very short manner.
713-780-ESPN if you want to chime in. Where are you at with this Astros team? Does the eye test tell you that they are legit World Series contenders? Does this statistic scare you a little bit? We would love to hear from y'all. Andrew Carlson filling in for Jake Asman today. I am BK Brad Kellner.